Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Sustainable Finance Podcast, brought to you by Ceres. I'm Paul Ellis, your host for these programs about developments in this fast-growing industry. OS Climate is developing open data and open source analytics that companies, markets, and governments need for climate alignment. OS Climate, a part of the nonprofit Linux Foundation, is building the technical equivalent of a public utility to scale and accelerate sustainable business, finance, investment, and regulation. In today's episode, we will hear from Truman Semans, OS Climate's founder and CEO, about the unique function of the OS Climate platform relative to other mega initiatives for collecting data, using artificial intelligence for predictive scenario analysis, and gauging the climate impact of companies and financial institutions. But before we start, I want to say a few words about our sponsor. I'm thrilled to talk about the important work Ceres is doing. Ceres is a nonprofit organization working with the most influential capital market leaders to solve the world's greatest sustainability challenges. Through their powerful networks and global collaborations of investors, companies, and nonprofits, Ceres drives action and inspires equitable, market-based, and policy solutions throughout the economy. To learn more, go to ceres.org/podcast. That's CERES.org/podcast. At Ceres, sustainability is the bottom line. Hello, Truman, and welcome to the Sustainable Finance Podcast.
Hello, Paul. It's a pleasure to be here, and thanks so much for giving us the opportunity.
Yes, Truman, we've been ready to roll here on this program. We're excited about having you join us today, and we're going to just jump right into the questions that we have. And the first one is, what is community-based open source and open data development?
Great. It's a long term. What it really gets down to, Paul, is users and providers of data and analytics around a cluster of problems, rolling up their sleeves and essentially cooperatively building the solutions that they need. So contributing intellectual property, developers, modelers, data scientists to get the job done, and to do that in an environment that is 100% completely transparent. All the meeting notes, every meeting, all the methodologies, all the code is a public good and is available and fully documented.
So, Truman, how does this? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, I can elaborate that if you want to ask follow-up questions, Paul.
Oh, sure. Yeah. We've got a whole list here, so that we're trying to get to. And tell us how this works in addressing sustainable finance and climate alignment challenges.
I'll go back a bit to the actual use cases for some of our most important members. So, for example, Allianz, which is one of our founding members, Allianz Investment Management, as I think probably most of your viewers know, was instrumental in getting the Net Zero Asset Owner Alliance formed, in setting a commitment to reduce its portfolio footprint to net zero by 2050, and then in setting a very aggressive 2030 goal for getting on that pathway. They did that, honestly, under the leadership of Gunter Thallinger and the CEO Oliver Bäte and Udo Reza, who's climate risk lead in Allianz Investment Management, without the data and analytic tools that they actually need to implement it. And in that leadership act, they turn to us, to OS Climate, as a place where, working together with others, they could, as I say, in this cooperative manner, jointly build the tools for strategic asset allocation, for portfolio construction, and making decisions on individual investments in multiple asset classes for fulfilling that commitment. Fast forward to today, Leila Yavadova, who is at Allianz Investment Management, is the project lead for developing the first of several portfolio alignment tools using the implied temperature rise methodology that was first developed under David Blood in the portfolio alignment team in the run-up to COP26, and is now being informed by GFANZ as it elaborates on the methodologies for doing that. And that project has a number of our other members participating in the efforts, BNP Asset Management, London Stock Exchange Group, and others, so Goldman Sachs. And I think it's noteworthy also that the Net Zero Asset Owner Alliance as a whole is a member of OS Climate. So they have, we interact with the broader membership of the NZAOA, on a periodic basis and take into account the requirements and specifications of those other large asset owners in developing the project. And the last thing I would say about it is we are in active discussions with our colleagues at RMI, which, as you may know, has recently taken over from the 2 Degrees Investing Initiative, the PACTA project, which is a different methodology for assessing portfolios and individual decisions. We've got a very long-standing relationship with RMI. They're a great team, and we have yet to determine exactly how we are going to have these modeling efforts relate to each other. But minimally, there'll be a lot of collaboration in how that goes forward, with the potential for various forms of cross-talking and perhaps integration.
Now, Truman, one of the organizations within the industry that you mentioned is GFANZ. Now, I'm not sure that our listeners know what GFANZ is all about, so if you could give us a little background on that, I'd appreciate it.
Sure, Paul. GFANZ has become, really one of the most important actors globally. The Glasgow Alliance of net zero initiatives, not only the Net Zero Asset Owner Alliance and Net Zero Banking Owner Alliance, the Net Zero Asset Manager Alliance. There's another one for professional services. It is largely the brainchild of Mike Bloomberg and Mark Carney, working together with others in the Bloomberg organization, Mary Shapiro and others. So you can think about it in some regards as an umbrella organization of those several alliances. It has been very heavily resourced with generous contributions of personnel from Bloomberg and supported by Bloomberg Philanthropies. And it really helps to have, in some regards, an umbrella of that type to interact with the UNFCCC, with the IFRS, and some of these other very important institutions and bodies. And one of the things that it is set forth to do is to sort of realize the vision that was laid forth in June by Mike Bloomberg and President Macron for a public utility of climate data. We're deeply in discussions with the technical team there that's led by Simone Kramer, seconded over from Bloomberg, and her colleagues. Essentially to GFANZ and to other initiatives. OS Climate really offers itself itself as a public utility, as an environment that is not aligned with any commercial provider, that is nonprofit, that has the combined might, if you will, of these contributing 15 members, and we're in the process of growing with a new cohort of members coming in, and also the great academic and governmental partners that we're working with. In that way, we hope that we will be instrumental and supportive through the provision of really world-class infrastructure, the pipes for how data flows that have been developed under the leadership of Red Hat and Vincent Caldera, one of their most senior technology and data architects and CTOs leading that effort.
Truman, the data analytics space sounds like it's getting very crowded, including overlapping mega initiatives like Macron Bloomberg, the European Single Access Point, One World Data Hub, and many players jockeying for position. So what differentiates OS Climate from these other participants?
It's a great question, Paul, and indeed it's an increasingly crowded space. One of the things that often happens, and I've been going to conferences of the parties, COPs, since before there were COPs in 1995 and before, is that this mad scramble goes on to sort of have a deliverable and get on the map and whatnot, and that's true not only of not just of companies, but of foundation supported NGOs. So it's a natural thing, and there's nothing really to be done about it. What I would say about the uniqueness of OS Climate, and I mentioned these earlier, but I'll talk about them a bit again. So while OS Climate looks, I think, from the outside, if you go look at our materials and our website, looks like it's a business association with Goldman, BNY Mellon, and BNP Paribas, and Federated Hermes, Microsoft, and Amazon in there. But one of the really important distinctions is that everything that is contributed by those members, intellectual property and the code that their developers contribute, the models, is a public good, completely open, unrestricted, with the most permissive form of intellectual property licensing, so that it can be used by the public, by commercial actors, without any constraints on the public, on the IP. And one of the things that's crucial about that, and very different from the other initiatives that you see out there, it's a driver of innovation. All these different entities can take what we develop and use it and incorporate it into their own initiatives. So that's one important distinction. One of the others is that in this co-op structure, where we have now more than 70 modelers and data scientists constructing the OS Climate platform, the data commons and the analytic tools, and a broader community of now almost 400 people across those members that are contributing other forms of expertise, subject matter expertise. We are a place where real reinvention can be avoided, where the participating organizations see a real force multiplier by joining forces with others instead of just developing their efforts within their particular silo. And those two factors are terribly important. And then there's a value proposition, just from a more business case perspective, where, instead of an organization, for example, financial services firm, just developing a portfolio analysis tool internally, and instead being part of this joint project that's led by Allianz, they can reduce their cost, right? These are very costly senior engineers and modelers who do this. They can increase the speed with which they develop solutions, and they can increase dramatically the learning. So getting down and working on those things together with the other premier institutions and organizations that are cracking these problems. That ends up to a very powerful value proposition, and it's why the members that we have currently and the new members coming in have joined.
That's very exciting, Truman. I know you recently spoken. I heard you speak at a climate and capital conference that our mutual good friend Jeff Gitterman put on with the New York Stock Exchange and ICE fairly recently. And one of the things that I came away from that conference with was a reinforced perspective that collaboration is alive and well in this part of the industry, especially when it comes to data analytics. So I'm really excited about the work that you're doing, and I had a couple more questions, and one is that how does OS climate relate to greenwash? That's such a big topic today, and it seems to be in some quarters overwhelming the discussion about the good things that are going on within data analytics and climate transition. So can you give us some perspective on that?
Yeah, sure, Paul. And it's a great question, and it's a very, very important one. First I'll just comment before getting to how we help at the nature of the problem. So this space, and you see this play out in, for example, the strident debate over ESG or not ESG, versus regulation and whatnot, is skeptical, and justifiably so. And the presence of greenwash has a real depressing effect, a chilling effect on confidence that the financial sector and companies can be part of the solution. If there's a lot of cheating going on, right, then that's that just has all kinds of negative implications on the perceptions of what's happening there. So when you get down to it, the simplest solution to greenwash is providing sunlight, but sunlight that is informed by really accurate data and the ability to analyze and understand what companies and what fund managers essentially and financial products are doing. So that simple proposition is harder to. It's a simple proposition. It's hard to do in practice, but what OS Climate is seeking to do is exactly that: is to develop, is to help deliver, along with the number of other great initiatives. And I can mention those if you ask a follow-up question. Trying to help to develop really high quality data that has broad coverage, that is consistent, that is interoperable, and presented in a way. And this is getting a little bit into the technical weeds, but I think it's worth going there. Presented in a way where that has really good automated data management as part of it, and the ability to essentially time travel and to be able to look with detailed information about how and who and when that data was actually originated and how it flows through to decision makers. That's the magic that Red Hat is working on. So for example, let's say, and we've seen this. I'm not going to call out any particular companies, but they're definitely out there, and some of your listeners can certainly look it up. We've seen instances where the carbon footprint of a major Fortune 500 has been dramatically restated by on the order of 50 or even 100% year over year, and that information, that change in information, needs to flow through the whole process, the whole kind of data pipelines, to the point where a portfolio manager is making a decision on the company in question, where a fund that is developing a financial product that includes that holding, or it needs to make a decision, an index creation, where an NGO needs to make a decision about where to put their efforts on buy sell, where a financial regulator needs to really understand the true nature of the financial risk, and the tie-in with systemic risk that is posed by organizations. That's what we're trying to and really making substantial strides to delivering. Does that answer your question?
It does, and I think that it's sort of leading us very comfortably into a discussion of what open wash is. That's the next. That seems to be the next level of participation. So,
thanks. It's an important question. There's such a thing as open wash, and I think, and we've had some important actors comment that we help to make open collaboration and open source, really one of the big catchwords, I guess, in the space, just by the nature of what we're doing. So there's a big difference between publishing data or publishing a tool and making it available to the public, but not being 100% transparent in the all of the different ways that data was developed, or those tools were developed, and the methodologies therein. The former is essentially has elements of the black box that are confounding our members, and that we're seeking to resolve by that terrific transparency. I mean, all of our meeting notes are sitting up on the web, so that people can see, and all of the details of the code and how the code was developed, and the math is all up there for public view. That's a very profound difference, because when it comes, at the end of the day, an investment committee or a credit committee needs to have. They can't deal with the black box. It would be breaching fiduciary responsibility oftentimes to use these things, and that's where we are quite different. And that's the difference between some of the things that are really out there that are open wash and true open source and open collaboration.
Now, Truman, can you provide us with links to your OS site in ways that will help our listeners explore this on their own time and from their own perspective? And then, of course, what we want to find out next from you is where online can Sustainable Finance Podcast listeners go to learn more about OS Climate's platform, and how can they reach you with questions about topics that we've discussed in today's episode?
Absolutely, Paul. So the first place to go is www.o like Oscar, S like Sam, -climate.org. And there's quite a wealth of information there. There is, on the Contact Us page, there is a place where an individual or an organization can request to communicate with us, can indicate the several different types of needs and interests that they may have, and we will follow up with them. For those that have, you'll see a link there under Projects, under the Projects tab, a link to our and we'll provide this to you and your team, Paul, what we call our community hub that sits on GitHub. That's sort of a curated entryway into the vast repositories of code that we have, the documentation that I've described, the meeting notes, and the documentation of methodologies, these kinds of things. So those that want to get to a more technical level can look there. On the events and resources part of our website, there's a library of videos that have been produced, and actually we're in the process of refreshing with a great set of new videos by our project leaders, going through each of the different project areas, the details and some of the how we address those things. For example, around physical risk or portfolio alignment or transition analysis, and how to get involved. So I would point those that are interested to those resources, and we'll follow up, Paul, with you and your team to provide links to each of those things.
Great. Well, thanks again very much to Truman Semans, founder and CEO of OS Climate, and to our sponsor, the Ceres Accelerator for Sustainable Capital Markets. The Ceres Accelerator is a center of excellence within Ceres that aims to transform the practices and policies that govern capital markets to reduce the worst financial impacts of the climate crisis. For more information, go to ceres.org/accelerator. That's CERES.org/accelerator. And to our listeners, join us again next week for another episode. I'm Paul Ellis, and this is the Sustainable Finance Podcast.